Well, good morning, good afternoon, everybody. Welcome in from truly across the continent for one of the most exciting Exploring by the Seat of Your Pants broadcasts we have had in some time. So, if you're joining us for the first time, a lot of you are, we are all about bringing conservation, science, and adventure to classrooms around the world. And our biggest partner is Parks Canada. We've done over 60 programs with them over the last few years. All of those are on our YouTube channel, so you can check out years of discovery and excitement right there. We've got a big series on with them right now, our Peak Discovery series, so lots to explore and discover. But today's program is a special one-off, and it is something that I've wanted to bring to you guys for like 4 years now. And so I'm so excited you're joining us today as we get to go on an adventure to study the lost shipwrecks of the Erebus and Terror in the Arctic. Now, Parks Canada has a marine archaeology team. These are experts that get to go underwater to go look at lost shipwrecks, find amazing stories under the ocean. And so I'm so excited that we get to feature John Moore. He's joining us. He's a marine Parks Canada archaeologist, and today he's going to be highlighting this lost duo of shipwrecks, one of the most iconic shipwreck stories in the history of exploration, and their discovery in Canada's north, in Nunavut, not too long ago. A little bit older than some of our kids joining today, but from my perspective, just something that's just so novel, so new, and so exciting. So a big welcome to all our audience. And without further ado, John, thank you so much for joining us, and can't wait for you to dive in and take us away.
Well, thank you very much, Jesse. Can everyone hear me okay?
We are all good. We hear you perfectly. Your slide is up. You are good to go, man.
Great. Well, it's wonderful to be here with everyone, and I'm really excited to be here to really tell you about some of the work we're doing up in the Arctic on the wrecks of the Erebus and Terror. So what I plan to do for about 20 minutes is to go through a PowerPoint presentation with about 20 or so slides. We've even got a bit of video in the deck, and describe what we're doing and some of the really cool things we found underwater. So let's dive right in. And this is the first shot we've got here is us diving on the wreck of the Erebus, excavating into a chest on the wreck of Erebus that contained the personal possessions of two sailors. So we'll learn a bit more about what we do, what we've learned about the Erebus, and how we do underwater archaeology in the Arctic. So let's dive back in time a little bit and look at the a little background of the history of the expedition. Um, Erebus and Terror were two ships searching for a northwest passage. So they were exploring through what is Nunavut in Canada in the Arctic, looking for a way to get from the Atlantic to the Pacific. And I'll show a map in the next slide. So this is what the Erebus and Terror looked like. They were sailing ships, but they also had engines in them with propellers. So the Erebus and Terror on the left here, and they were commanded by two Royal Navy from the British Royal Navy officers named Sir John Franklin and Captain Francis Crozier. So they were the heads of the expedition. Now looking at a map, this is kind of a funny looking map, but what we have is a part of the globe showing the United Kingdom on the top right rather. And if we swing around, we can see Greenland there, and at the bottom left is northern Canada, or the Arctic. So if I'll get Jesse to confirm, you can see my cursor
We
on my
can indeed.
computer.
Yep.
So the ships set out in 1845, well over 100 years ago, to cross the Atlantic to come over, and they're trying to get across through the Arctic here, through passages through the various islands. It was very tricky, there's a lot of ice. And of course, at the time, Inuit were living there. They've lived there for thousands of years. So it wasn't uninhabited, but this was an area that Europeans, including the Royal Navy and the Erebus and Terror, were trying to get through to find a way to get over to the left here, to the west, into the Pacific Ocean. Now, unfortunately for the expedition, the ships became stuck in ice. And if I'll go back to the previous slide, they were meant to go for 3 years, but after a year, they got stuck in this area to the south. They were able to get partway through. They got stuck in the ice in 1846, and they really couldn't get the ships out of the ice. And to make a long story short, unfortunately, all of the crew members, there was about 130 of them, they all died during the expedition. So this is not a real good news story for Arctic exploration and the crew members. And for many years, expeditions were sent out in search of the Erebus and Terror, and it took well over 170 years for the ships to be found. There were clues found over the years as to what happened. The crew left a message on King William Island, and this is the island where they got stuck here. So I'm circling it in with my cursor. It's called in Inuktitut, it's called Kikitak or King William Island. So they got stuck at the very northern tip of King William Island. And after a couple of years being stuck in the ice, they felt that they were running out of food. They really were not going to get unstuck from the ice. So the crew members decided to leave the ships and try to make it overland to southern Canada. Unfortunately, they all died in that process. And sometime thereafter, we don't know how or when, this is another mystery of this expedition, which has got a ton of mysteries associated with it. Somehow, at a later time, the ships where they had been stuck in the ice were somehow released from the ice or drifted south, or maybe if some sailors went back. And later on, we know that the Terror, one of the ships, sank here, and another one sank here to the south. So the wrecks were found after many years of searching. Erebus, the lead ship, was found in 2014, and the Terror was found in 2016. And since that time, over just over 10 years, we have been conducting underwater archaeology, diving, exploration, and study of these shipwrecks, which I'll get into in a bit. One of the really fascinating aspects of this story is that Inuit who were living in the Arctic at the time really crossed paths. They learned about the expedition and the ships at the time, and they were actually able to tell later searchers, such as this gentleman named Schwatka, Frederick Schwatka, about what they learned about the ships, what they saw about the expedition, and they gave some clues as to where the ships had sunk. And that's what helped us as archaeologists um, define a search area where we could search for the wrecks that were found in 2014 and 2016. And here we see Schwatka in about 1879 talking with Inuit in an igloo in the area, gathering as much information as he can about the lost expedition, which fascinated people for many, many years. We also have a lot of information, historical information about the ships, the crew members, what their names were, where they came from, and we even have ship plans of the ships themselves that were made at the time when the ships were built and just before the expedition. So we as archaeologists have a lot of information to go on to learn about really the expedition and how it was equipped and all of the special things they had on board to try to maximize their chance of success of finding that Northwest Passage from the Atlantic to the Pacific. So a lot of what we do is this background historical research to learn as much as we can. And let's get to the wrecks themselves. I'll give you a little tour of what we've done and how we've done it. So this is a kind of a composite view of the wreck of the Erebus. We have the bow at the left here and the stern here. And this is a model built up of many, many thousands of photographs. And the wreck is only in about 11 meters or 30 feet of water, so it's quite shallow. And as you can see here, a lot of the masts and all of the other equipment of the ship are gone. But we were able to dive in and explore around the ship, and we're even able to go inside a little bit and have a look around. And as you'll see in a couple of minutes, we're able to excavate underwater like archaeologists are able to excavate on land. And I'll go through some pretty quick photos. We're in cold water here, so we have to use diving equipment. We use full face masks and dry suits. We have communication systems. We're able to talk to each other underwater. So here we have some diving on the Erebus. This is the bow here, and this is one of the anchors. The visibility is really, really clear. We're able to see quite far and swim all around the wreck. We also have, in order to be able to do the diving, we have a large barge with a couple of, we have a lab office and some other equipment on top of the barge to be able to dive over the wreck. And this is a really amazing shot from a drone where you can see our support barge and the wreck actually underwater here. So you're looking top down here a couple of divers in the water. One of them is me, actually. This is from a few years ago, and we have a ship to be able to go up to the Arctic and to be able to tow this barge over to the wreck. This is our barge, which allows us to do all that amazing diving. And a really cool thing about the work we do, once we have that barge in place, we are able to use really cool diving equipment such as hard hats. We use that with the air, our breathing air supplied to us by an umbilical. And what's really nice about these suits is we can able to send hot water to them. So they're called hot water suits, and we're able to do our diving in really comfortable water. It's almost like kind of diving in a jacuzzi. It's really fun. We have cameras and videos and a lot of safety equipment, and we've had local members of the community from a town called Joe Haven working with us. And here we have Jonathan Pukiknak helping work on some of the artifacts we recovered. This is what the wreck looks like when we're excavating. So we're able to clear away the vegetation like you would excavate a site on land. We're able to use these special underwater vacuum cleaners to be able to clear away the sediments and the dirt underwater. And here what we're looking at is these are actually drawers from furnishings in the officers area that we're able to carefully and meticulously excavate and uncover and unearth, if you will, the artifacts that were in the ship at the time of it sinking. So we're able to kind of step back in time. We can explore the cabins of some of the officers that we know by name, and there's even photographs of some of these uh, some of the more senior upper upper level crew members, such as this lieutenant or lieutenant James Fairholm, and we've been able to excavate part of his cabin and find bottles. And underwater, we have really good preservation, so we can have still some of the contents left in these bottles. We found epaulets. These are kind of you'll see these funny things that are on the shoulder, his shoulder in this photograph that indicate his rank. These were left behind when the men left the ship because they were of no use in the Arctic in their desperate attempt to reach the south. And really cool find, we actually found some fossils, and this is a bit of a test for you. Maybe someone at the end can say, why would we have found fossils in the cabin of this lieutenant? And I'll give you a little bit of a clue. Um, part of the expedition's goals was exploration. We've excavated some other cabins like this storage room, which is called a pantry, and we found a complete set of dinnerware that would have been used by an officer, and even an accordion and all kinds of incredibly well-preserved artifacts. We as archaeologists, we kind of take apart what we see like a jigsaw puzzle so that we can learn as much about it as possible. So imagine if someone were to go into your rooms and do an excavation and try to kind of piece together what you did the previous day. Maybe there's some clues in your room that someone would be able to kind of decipher and reconstruct your activities. This is kind of what we're doing underwater on the shipwreck, learning as much as we can. We found, excuse me, brushes that you can see, the toothbrush, hairbrush, coins, book covers. We've even been able to extract DNA from this hairbrush in the bottom left here. I mentioned at the outset we've excavated a seaman's chest. We wanted to look at the lower ranking crew members as well. So here we have a chest which actually was almost full of, had many pistols in it. And you can see one of the pistols recovered it here at the top right. A toothbrush in much worse condition than the other example I had mentioned. Coins, medicines. Here's a little bit of a little clip here showing what it's like to excavate underwater. So it's a very careful process. We're not being, we're being very careful. We're using this underwater suction dredge to suck away the sediment and to unearth artifacts. We carefully record them. We put them in bags. Everything is drawn and photographed and recorded. So those are those plates that I mentioned, which we are uncovering. Here's a toothbrush being recovered. We have to carefully wrap it, map it, record it. And this is actually an accordion. Imagine that, a musical instrument still surviving underwater that we recovered and brought to the surface. Now I'm going to go on quickly to the wreck of the Terror. And the really neat thing about the Terror is it's in a much deeper water, and therefore it's a little more protected than the Erebus, and it's a lot more intact. So here you can see some top-down views showing, if you can see my cursor here, the bow end and the stern. And the neat thing about the Terror is some of the masts are partially standing. It's almost like a ship that's frozen in time on the bottom of the seabed. So here we have a top-down view from a sonar system. It's kind of like a fancy fish finder. And here we have a site plan that we produced showing the bow, the stern, and some of the features or some of the equipment on the upper deck that we have explored and documented. A neat thing about our work in the Arctic is we're actually able to get to these sites not only by ship and boat, but also on the ice, because most of the year the sea is frozen. So we've actually conducted projects from ice camps where we've actually excavated a hole in the ice that's about 2 meters thick. We've either dived through ourselves or we send down a remotely operated vehicle. So this is a project we did in 2017 with local Inuit community members, and this is our ROV, which has propellers and it can fly around underwater, and it has lights and video cameras, and we can record the site. And as an indication of how really well preserved the Terror is, this is the ship's wheel. So this is where the ship would have been steered by the crew members, and it's incredibly intact. And here we have on the top right our ice camp, which we used to carry out this project. We have dived underwater on the wreck, and a really neat part of the wreck is there's actually an outhouse still intact on the stern. And I'll give you a little test here. If someone can tell me what the stern or the back end of a ship, a sailing ship of the 19th century was called, that'll be a little bit of a quiz that um, Jesse can give you at the very end. We've actually even been able to send in a micro or small ROV into the wreck to explore around inside, which has been really cool. And here I am with that ROV in my hand, and I'm about to put it down inside the wreck. So an amazing interior. Here's some interior shots from 2019 where we flew the ROV in. This is again Captain Crozier's ship, the Terror, showing incredible preservation. These are bottles in storage shelves that are still intact. So that tells us when the ship sank it's in about, I'd say 20-25 meters, around 60 plus feet. So it's a lot deeper, a lot better preserved than the Erebus. And inside, it's like, almost the day that the crew members left the ship. So it's really well preserved. This is Captain Crozier's desk in his cabin at the stern of the ship. And we're almost wrapped up here, but I'll share a bit of video here. This is what it's like to dive on the Terror and the ship's wheel. As I mentioned, really well preserved. You can imagine the men would have had to stand there and steer the ship through storms, through ice flows. Much of the wreck is covered in underwater vegetation, so some of that we have to peer under and explore around. It hides much of the shipwreck under, and here's that ROV being placed into the wreck and to explore around. We have a little bit of a video here showing that footage inside the wreck, and we do have links at the end of the presentation where you can see the full video and explore yourself and watch that yourself. So here we have some of the crew's uh, bottles and eating implements, drinking implements in their living area in the forward part of the ship, plates and other things just where they were left. And here we're moving down a hallway past some of the officer accommodations. The officers had really nice fancy cabins to themselves where over half of the crew members were kind of jammed, if you will, into the bow end or the forward end of the ship, and they slept in hammocks while the officers slept in pretty comfy beds. And we're moving into Captain Crozier. No, we're not in Captain Crozier's cabin. We're in one of the officers' cabins here, and you can see the bed place where that officer would have slept. And these are really funny boards on the side of the bed. And the idea here is they're called lee boards, and they're positioned so that in really rough weather, you're not going to fall out of bed. Okay. Pretty much wrapped up here, but I want to share some links with you. We've got a really amazing website, Parks Canada website on the Erebus and Terror, where there's lots of information. There's a lot of resources on artifacts and how we found the wrecks, how we're exploring, what we've done over the years. We have a partner site in Joe Haven, the nearest community to the wrecks, also in Nuktduk called Uksukduk, where there's a museum, and it's called run by the Nadalik Heritage Society. So they have a website. We have Facebook and Instagram. We have PC Archaeology presence on X, and we also have some YouTube content. So there is a lot of resources online for you to have a look at, and I encourage you to do so.
Oh, John, that was so fantastic, man. That footage is just unreal. If you want to come out of screen share so you can see us again, have a bit of a conversation, we are going to dive in with a nice long Q&A. So our live classes, our YouTube classes, there's so many of you, which is awesome. YouTube, please start sharing in the chat. We'd love to hear from you over the next 20 minutes or so. Live classes, I'm going to give you a second to put your thinking caps on. And John, I'll begin with some great questions from online. So from Miss Mass Group, do you ever get any curious animals checking you out? You're diving under there and a seal comes up to, lick the scuba gear.
No, absolutely. It's funny you mentioned that because I was diving with one of my team members, and I was swimming off the wreck, and he kind of was waving to me, calling me over the communication systems, and then he was saying, like, pointing for me to turn around, and I turned around, and there was a huge bearded seal right behind me, just looking at us, and kind of did one of these, jumped out of my dry suit a little bit and swam away. But yes, there's all kinds of sea life on the wreck, seals and fish and plants, anemones. It's what we call the wreck is an artificial reef. So it's like a reef. It's full of life.
There's actually some really, really innovative work being done around the world in the sort of as a base for coral reefs to grow, where they take old things like subway cars and they clear them out of anything that might be toxic and put them down to serve as an artificial reef. And you showed some of the footage where you see all those creatures growing on the ship. I'm so glad you mentioned bearded seal too. We've done a lot of marine acoustic stuff, and I really encourage our classes, listen to a bearded seal. Find that online. It's one of the most spacey, weird sounds in all of nature. So thanks for that, John. Great first question, guys. All right, Mr. Ovdebo's class, Sexsmith, come on in, unmute your mic. You guys are good to go if you want to kick us off with a question in Alberta. Hello, everyone. Hi, come on in, unmute, come chat with us. Who's got a question for John? Let's see. Feel free to come on up to the computer. Our Watson kids, we're coming to you next in Ms. Gounder's class. We'll come to you in a second, but we can check in. Are you there? Maybe, kind of? There we are.
Yep.
Hi.
Can you hear us?
Yeah, perfect.
Connor, ask a question.
When the ship grows, like the first ship you were talking about, do you know what temperature it was to freeze the ship?
Ooh, yeah. What temperature is it at under the water there to freeze it all?
Okay, underwater, we have dived in water that's -1 degree Celsius up into about +6 degrees Celsius. So it's really quite cold.
Yeah. And by the way, on that note, does that help preserve the ship? Like if the Erebus and Terror went down in the Caribbean, would they be as intact as they are or no?
Definitely. The cold water helps preserve the shipwrecks, just much like it helps preserve, food in a refrigerator or in a freezer. It definitely helps, yeah.
Do not leave your meat out on the counter for 5 hours. It'll go very, very wrong. Our Watson Kids crew, man, there's like a lineup of you. That's amazing. Come on up and take us away with a question.
What were the fossils for?
Ooh.
Where did they come from?
Okay, well, I kind of posed that as a little bit of a test, but the crew members were searching. They were conducting science. They're conducting exploration as it respects what they didn't know at the time. Like there was Inuit living in the area, but they were looking at all kinds of things. Like they were exploring for animals and geology, which is the study of rocks. And really, that's what we think those fossils are. They're souvenirs from when the crew members were either exploring or just picked up. You know, when you go to the beach and you go on holiday, or you go down visiting a place you haven't been before, and you pick up a rock or souvenir. We think they could be just that, where Fairholm, that the officer picked them up, and maybe they're part of a scientific exploration or a scientific project, or maybe they're just mementos from his time on shore.
How neat is that? Very cool. Thanks for the question, guys. And Kelowna, we're coming back to you in a bit. I promise. Keep that lineup going. Miss Gownder's class, there's a few of you too. Come on in also in BC. Raymer, hi, guys. Hello. Let's see. Hi, I think you're in. Your mic should be on, but it's not working. So either smack the computer. I find that's very satisfying. Or worse,
Can you hear us now?
again.
Okay, awesome. Penny here has a question. How long did it take you guys to train?
Ooh.
Oh, well, you know what? I think this is really interesting for some of the students in on this call. But I started doing archaeology when I was 14 in high school. So I started really quite young, and I gained experience through high school. And all of us have gone to university in the team. So we go to university and we learn to dive, and we do training on the job. So really, I've been doing this for over 30 years, but it takes a long time to build up the experience. But you know, you can start diving, start doing archaeology when you're young, and if anyone's interested, I would really highly encourage it.
I love the archaeology angle, and that is something that you do need a lot of specialized training. We're going to get to that question no matter what, whether or not you ask it. I'll make sure to ask John a little bit about what it takes to be an archaeologist. But on the diving front, I can say, as someone who's dove on shipwrecks that aren't near as cool as the Erebus and Terror, but are nonetheless amazing and underwater, you can start on the path to being a diver at 8. So if you're on an ocean, if you're on a lake, if you're on a quarry, you can go and learn to start diving at 8 years old, which I think all of our students are today. And you can end up exploring things kind of like John, which is very, very neat, kind of like black magic going underwater and being able to breathe. So great question, guys. We're going to take a couple from our YouTube audience, and then Mr. Hovdebo's class, we're coming back to you. Miss Cork wants to know, are there tools you use to excavate in water, and are they similar to those that you'd use on land?
Yeah, I think I showed a bit of a video of us using, excuse me, an underwater dredge. It's like an underwater vacuum cleaner. So we're able to very carefully excavate sediments underwater. We even use trowels like land archaeologists do, or we use knives, or I even use a spoon sometimes to excavate. And we have underwater cameras that are in waterproof housings, and we have waterproof paper. So we have all kinds of tools that are adapted to working underwater.
Super
Excuse
cool.
me, I'll take a
Oh
drink
yeah,
here.
take a drink. Drinking is half the fun of Exploring by the Seat of Your Pants broadcast. It's a lot of talking. So while you do that, I'll come back in just a second. Caesar, joining us in Nicaragua today, has a neat question. So we were sort of back on the animal front for a quick second before we go back to Sexsmith. And he wants to know if you have to worry about polar bears when you're out on the ice. Are there any big predators that you're worrying about when you're out there?
Yeah, definitely, we do. We're in their habitat, so we definitely keep an eye out for polar bears. We have say we're diving from the ice, or we're having an ice camp. We do watch out for polar bears around the clock, and yeah, definitely, we have to be very careful. And polar bears can swim as well, very, very well. So even if we're in a boat in the open water, we have to be very careful of polar bears. And when we go ashore, and say we're going to go pick up something, or transport someone out of the project by plane, we have to be very vigilant for polar bears. Definitely.
We've actually had one of the world's great divers, Jill Heinerth, on this program many times, and she was actually diving once when a polar bear came up to her in the water, and she had to dive under to avoid it. They are very good swimmers, and so this is something that you have to worry about in the Arctic, and I'm really glad we got that question. So thanks, Caesar. All right, Sexsmith, we're back to Alberta. Unmute your mic. Come on in and take us away. Hey, guys.
What's your favorite thing you guys have found?
Ooh, no pressure.
Well, I was fortunate enough to be on the boat when we actually found the wreck of the Erebus, so that was pretty cool. That was in 2014, so um, that was pretty exciting. And after having searched for quite a few years, so that was great. And I was fortunate to be. I'm speaking of myself here as a group. We're really excited to have found the Erebus, and I did the first dive with my colleague Ryan, and actually came across the ship's bell in that first dive. So that was pretty cool. So,
John, you're underselling this, man. That is so. It's a shipwreck lost for over 100 years. It's amazing. You were there when they found it, and you got to be on the first dive of it. That is like,
yes.
my
Yeah,
gosh.
and the really neat thing about the bell was when we came up to the bell, it had the date 1845 on it, which, as you know, is the date of the expedition. Unfortunately, it didn't have the ship's name on it, which most bells do, but
Interesting.
we'll take the date. So
Very cool. So John and I did a test call before this, so I got a little bit of this story. And for me, like seeing the plates and how beautiful they are, and the journal, like those are mind blowing. But to be there to discover the wreck, we've actually had a few people in our history at Exploring by the Seat of Your Pants that have been the first to find something like that. And honestly, there's few joys greater in the world of science and exploration. So lucky you, man. That's awesome. Miss Gounder's class, come on back in, unmute your mic, take us away with a second question. Back to BC. Let's see. We got you guys. Come on in if you're there. Maybe, kind of, sort of. BC, can you hear me now? Kind of. Let's see. I'll head to YouTube first, and we'll come back to you guys if you have a second question while you're pulling it together. In Miss Jordan's class, Mason wants to know how much time passed from the time the ship set sail to the time they sunk. Was it like a Titanic deal, or was it a few days, or what?
yeah, really good question, Mason. We don't know exactly. In fact, we don't know the exact date or time that the ship sank. They got stuck in the ice in September 1846, and there's indications that it's probably around 2 or 3 years, maybe a little bit more, between the time that they were stuck in the ice to. Well, actually, the men left the ships in 1848, so they were stuck in the ice about 2 years, and then probably a year or two after that, they had sunk. We don't know exactly, so that's one of the mysteries of this expedition, the
Fascinating.
story, really.
Yeah. Thanks, John. All right, we're going to take one more online, and then I'm going to pepper a few questions that I think are really important about these voyages. So Miss Cork wants to know, how did you find the ships, and are you still working on them now?
Yeah, well, how did we find the shipwrecks? Well, for a number of years, we went to the Arctic. We were using a Coast Guard ship as our kind of base of operations, and we were using other smaller vessels to search back and forth in like a grid pattern, towing sonar systems. So these are almost like fish finders, really fancy fish finders that can map the seafloor, and they can record say a 150-meter wide path along the seafloor. So we went back and forth for many weeks over the years, and really it was a case of trying to cover as much of the seafloor to locate the wrecks, which using that system can kind of stand out from natural features like rocks or shoals or natural sediments. So that was the method used and how we found
Cool.
the wreck.
And you're still working on it now? Like there's still lots more to be discovered?
We still we were up on the sites this last year. So yeah, we
There's
are. And I should add that the field work, the diving, is only one part of the work. There's research to do. There's writing. There's consulting, doing analysis on the contents of the artifacts and what they're made of. So what we do underwater is kind of like the tip of the iceberg of the work we're doing. So there's a lot of office and laboratory research that we have to do as well.
I'm really glad you mentioned this, because when it comes to space exploration, ocean discoveries like this, a lot of people assume that it's like, oh, you found it, cool, it's done, next project. And this will be a career for many people to uncover this wreck, to make sure it's preserved in the right way, to unlock its mysteries, to share it with the world. Like this is many people on this team that are working for years, if not decades, to really properly tell the story of the Erebus and Terror. So I'm glad we got that query.
Yeah, and if I can jump in there quickly, like we're doing the archaeology, but there's all kinds of other things that are taking place on the site. For instance, we have guardians who are helping to protect the site. We have other people that are building museum exhibits. We have others that are working on conserving or working on the artifacts. So the underwater work is only really just a part of the whole package of everything that's going on.
Very cool. Thanks, John. All right, I'm going to take a really interesting question from our YouTube audience, and then I'll wrap up with one of my own. So Miss LaForge wants to know, did you find any other shipwrecks while you were searching for those two? It was like, oh, ship graveyard. Or how did it work?
No, that's a really good question too, because that does sometimes happen. We do find things kind of by accident when we're not even looking for them. But in this case, no, we did not. In part because there's so few shipwrecks in the area that we were searching that as soon as we came across the Erebus, the first one in 2014, we had a pretty good idea that it was either Erebus or Terror. But it does happen, but in other areas where there was more shipwrecks.
Yeah. So on the shipwreck note, John, and this is where I want to come in with the archaeology angle. Could anyone just go dive and discover mysteries on the Erebus or Terror? Like, why do you need to be an archaeologist? What does that special training allow you to do that makes it worthwhile to have it exploring it in this way?
Yeah, well, there's a few reasons. I won't get into them all, but one of them is being safe and having the training to be able to dive in cold water in a very remote location, to have the skills to be able to excavate without damaging the wreck, but also being able to excavate, for instance, or record the wreck in a way that we don't lose the information or we don't damage the artifacts. So there's a lot of experience that we need to be able to conduct it in a safe and scientific manner, really.
Love featuring this, and it's something where, again, a lot of people assume, oh, you find something, just dig it up. No, there's a lot of work that goes into this. And in fact, back 100, 200 years ago when we used to do archaeology, there was a lot less lower standards of how we would uncover something like this. And so because we do it in this way, we learn so much more about it. We don't destroy things. We preserve things for decades, if not hundreds of years down the road, that allows even future scientists to unlock even more mysteries from it. And that's sort of the essence of archaeology, paleontology for that matter, a lot of science. Now, a lot of detail, a lot of work goes into doing it slowly, methodically, in a way that preserves it for as long as we may want to study and learn more about it.
And as a quick follow-up to that, Jesse, we do it in such a way that we're doing it so carefully that we're able to even preserve and find and recover hairs on a hairbrush and attempt to extract DNA. So there's no artifact too small on the wreck.
John, this has been such a pleasure for me. I'm grinning ear to ear. Professional detachment is out the window. This is such a fun story. You already highlighted a great slide with all sorts of places that people can go to learn even more. I will encourage our classes. If you've got extra questions, please do email them to us at exploringbytheseatofyourpants. We will get you those answers. We've got a French broadcast coming right after this. But before we wrap up and say farewell, John, is there any final message you'd like to leave our audience with today about the Erebus and Terror wrecks?
Well, I think this is an amazing story, and I encourage those who are listening, watching, to go to our website, and there's also plenty of books about this expedition. There's lots of, for all ages, and there's a lot of it's not just all in English too. So there's a lot out there that I encourage you to explore and find out as much as you can, because it's a really, really fascinating story. It's a way to learn a lot about Nunavut, and there's a lot of connections to Inuit history and Inuit culture, and we've got a lot of that on our website. So I really do encourage you to explore this story and learn more about the Arctic and this one kind of expedition, this one story that is really interesting, but it's not the whole picture of the Arctic. But it's well worth exploring further and learning more.
I'm off to do just that, John. I can't hardly wait. I encourage our classes to do the same, and I will email you all those resources when we are done. John, what we do to wrap up every broadcast, and please do stick around with me for after we're done live. I'm going to bring in all our classes to say thank you and farewell. Some have had to go to lunch, but our Sexsmith Alberta class, if you want to join me in saying thank you, and YouTubers, you can yell out at home. Have a wonderful day, everyone. Thank you so, so much. Bye, everyone. And we are done.